Nobody warned me about this part. They told me about the nausea. They told me about staying hydrated, eating protein, going slow on carbs. They told me the scale would move. What they didn't tell me, what I didn't see coming at all, was taking the food noise away would also mean grieving something. Week 9, and I want to talk about the emotional side of this journey that's happening in your chest, not just on the scale. Because if you felt it and you thought you were alone, you're not. And if you haven't felt it, you might. So let's talk about it. The content in this video is for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. I am a nurse practitioner sharing my own personal health journey. I am not your nurse practitioner. My experience is not a substitute for professional medical advice. Always consult your own licensed healthcare provider before making any changes to your medications, your diet, or your health plan. If you're new here, welcome. If you're not new, welcome back. I'm Fallon. I'm a nurse practitioner navigating perimenopause, post-VSG weight regain, and a GLP-1 journey using Mounjaro. First, let's name it. Food noise is that constant mental background chatter that many of us have lived with for so long that we didn't even realize it was there. It sounds like this. What am I going to eat next? Should I have gotten a bigger serving? I'll start over Monday. I deserve this. I shouldn't have eaten it. What's in the fridge? I'm not even hungry, but I want a little something. I'll just have a little bit. God, I can't stop thinking about what I ate for lunch. It is relentless. And for a lot of us, especially women in midlife who have been dieting since we were kids, it is the soundtrack, or has been the soundtrack, of our life for decades. And then you take this medication and it goes quiet. The first feeling is relief. Genuine, tearful relief. And then, sometimes right behind it, comes something unexpected. Something that almost feels like loss. Here's what surprised me. I grieved food. Not because I was starving, because I wasn't. I wasn't even hungry. But because food was never just fuel for me. And maybe it isn't just fuel for you either. Food was how I celebrated. It was what I looked forward to at the end of a hard day. It was how I connected with my family, my culture, my memories. It was my reward system, my comfort system, my coping mechanism. And honestly, it was a big part of my personality. I was the girl who loved food, who knew every restaurant, who knew all the menus, who showed love by cooking for people. And when Mounjaro quieted the noise, it also dimmed some of that. And I had to sit with a question that I wasn't ready for. If I'm not using food to cope, what do I do with the hard feelings now? That's not the side effect anyone puts in a pamphlet, but it is real, and it's worth talking about. Some of you have written me saying you cried at a restaurant. You felt nothing looking at your favorite food and didn't know how to feel about feeling nothing. That you felt guilty, like you were betraying some old version of yourself, that your family noticed, and that it felt strange. That you used to bond with your friends over big meals, and now you order half an appetizer. You feel like you don't belong at the table the same way. If that's you, I see you. And that is grief. And grief doesn't need to make logical sense to be real. Here's a layer even deeper, and I want you to sit with this one. For many of us, especially women who've been overweight or the big girl, the one always on a diet, our struggle with food and our body has become a part of our identity. We've built community around it. We've bonded over it. We've made it part of our humor, our self-deprecation, our story. And when that struggle starts to lift, when the medication is working, when the weight starts coming off, there can be a disorienting moment where you think, who am I now? What do I talk about if I'm not complaining about my diet? Will my friends still relate to me? Do I deserve this, or did I just cheat? Am I the same person if I'm in a smaller body? This is real. This is not vanity. This is identity. And it's something therapy, journaling, or even just naming it out loud, just like we're doing right now, can help you process. The women who do best on this journey long term aren't just changing their bodies, they're updating the story they tell about themselves. And that story update is uncomfortable before it becomes liberating. And for those of us going through perimenopause or menopause, there's another layer to this. Our hormones are already doing something enormous to our emotional landscape, right? Estrogen doesn't just regulate our cycle, it regulates serotonin. It affects our mood, anxiety, emotional resilience. So many of us come into this GLP-1 journey already emotionally thinner skinned than when we used to be, already grieving our younger selves, already navigating a body that feels unfamiliar. Adding a medication that fundamentally changes your relationship with food, something so tied to comfort and emotion. On top of that hormonal shift, that's a lot of change at once. Be gentle with yourself about that. Have some grace with yourself. If you're finding that your mood is lower, that you feel more anxious, that the emotional eating coping mechanism is gone, and nothing has replaced that, please talk to someone. Your prescribing provider, a therapist, your GYN. These things are connected and deserve support in all of it, not just the number on the scale. So you're hearing this and you're saying, this is me. So what do you do with all this? Well, I'm actually going to tell you what's helping me. And I'm just speaking from a personal experience and my personal journey. Number one, I named it. Just saying it out loud. I have shorts on Instagram, probably have a shorts here on YouTube that I talk about it. Just saying it out loud, I think I'm grieving food took away some of its power. You can't process what you don't acknowledge. Number two, I found new rituals. Food rituals don't have to disappear, they just evolve. I still make a beautiful plate. I still cook with intention and enjoyment. I just eat less of it. And I focus more on the experience than the quantity. The sitting down, the laughing, the talking, the moving around the kitchen and tasting. Those things still mean something. Number three, I got curious about what I was actually feeling. When I used to reach for food, I started asking, am I bored? Am I anxious? Am I lonely? Am I tired? And actually addressing that instead of reaching for food. Sometimes that meant going for a walk. Sometimes it meant jumping on my trampoline. Sometimes it meant calling a friend or talking to my sister on the phone. Sometimes just sitting with the feeling for 10 minutes and realizing it had passed on made a difference. The fourth thing I do is I let myself be proud, not in an arrogant way. And honestly, this is new for me. But I've worked really hard on my relationship with myself, and I'm allowed to feel good about that. I'm allowed to feel good about the effort that I'm putting into this process. The guilt around using a medication needs to go. You did not take the easy road. You took a road that requires enormous emotional work. So own that. And five, I keep talking about it here with you because community is one of the things that has replaced some of what I used to get from my connection with food. Connection, being seen, mattering to someone's day. Okay, welcome to Clinical Corner. This is where I take everything we just talked about emotionally and show you what's actually happening in your brain and body. Because understanding the why behind what you're feeling, that makes it less scary and more manageable. So let's get into it. First, let's talk about what emotional eating actually is at a neurological level. Because it's not a character flaw and it's not a weakness, it is brain chemistry. So when you eat, especially foods that are high in sugar, fat, salt, all the good things, your brain releases dopamine. And dopamine is your reward neurotransmitter. It creates a feeling of pleasure and satisfaction. And more importantly, it creates a drive to repeat the behavior that caused it. So this is the same neurotransmitter that's affected by drug use, alcohol use, and food, anything that can be an addiction. But what it does is it drives you to repeat that behavior, which is why it becomes an addiction. So when you're stressed, anxious, lonely, bored, and you eat something pleasurable, your brain logs that as eating fixed the bad feeling. Do that enough time over the years, over decades, and your brain has literally built a neural pathway, which is a well-worn groove in the brain. You know how we have grooves in our brain, that roots directly from emotional discomfort straight to food-seeking behavior. This is why telling someone to just have more willpower around emotional eating is like telling someone to just choose a different highway and there's no other highway to get on. The road to food is the only road your brain knows how to take. Now layer in menopause on top of that. Here's where it really gets important for us specifically. Estrogen plays a direct role in regulating serotonin, the neurotransmitter most associated with mood stability, emotional resilience, and a sense of well-being. As estrogen declines, remember in perimenopause and menopause, serotonin availability drops with it. Here's why that matters for emotional eating. Because serotonin and dopamine are linked. When serotonin is low, your brain becomes more dependent on dopamine hits to regulate your mood. One of the fastest, most reliable dopamine sources available to us, food. This means that menopausal women are often biologically more vulnerable to emotional eating, not because they lack discipline or willpower, but because their neurochemistry is literally seeking fast dopamine to compensate for falling serotonin. And here's the compounding factor: poor sleep, which is extremely common in menopause due to night sweats and hormonal shifts, glucose shifts. This raises ghrelin, which is your hunger hormone, and lowers leptin, which is your fullness hormone. And it does this simultaneously. So you wake up hungrier, less satisfied when you do eat, and emotionally more reactive, all at once. This is not a mindset problem. This is a biology. So where does Mounjaro and GLP-1 medications broadly fit into this thing? We know GLP-1 receptors exist in the gut and the pancreas. That's the appetite and the blood sugar piece, right? But here's what's fascinating and what research is increasingly pointing to. GLP-1 receptors also exist in the brain, specifically areas involved in reward processing and emotional regulation, including the hypothalamus, which governs hunger signals, and the mesolimbic system, which is basically the brain's core reward system. That's just a big word for that. The same system that processes the dopamine hit from food. What scientists believe is happening, and this is evolving area of research, so I want to be transparent about that. We don't know specifically yet and all the things that it's doing, but this is what research is finding with the studies that they're doing. And they're saying that GLP-1 medications may be dampening the reward signal that food sends to the brain, which totally makes sense. Not just making the stomach feel full faster, but actually reducing how compelling and rewarding food actually feels at a neurological level. And this is why the food noise goes quiet. You're not just less hungry, you're less driven. The dopamine pull of food is simply weaker. And now you understand why that feels like grief. Because for many of us, that dopamine pull was doing a lot of emotional heavy lifting for us for decades. Now this brings us to what I call the coping gap. When a GLP-1 removes food as your primary emotional regulation tool, it doesn't automatically install a replacement, right? That gap is real, it's felt, right? That's why you feel the grief. And if it isn't filled intentionally, one of two things tends to happen. One, the emotional discomfort that food was managing surfaces without a container, which starts to look like increased anxiety, panic attacks, irritability, low mood, lack of interest in anything. Or two, the brain finds another fast dopamine source to fill the gap. For some people, that could be alcohol. For some, it's scrolling, maybe shopping, or spending money. The brain is always seeking regulation. So, the clinical recommendations that I have, and what the emerging GLP-1 behavioral research supports, is that behavioral support alongside medication produces significantly better long-term outcomes than medication alone. What does this look like practically? So how can you fill this coping gap? Mindfulness-based practices, like 5 minutes, taking a pause between an emotional trigger, breathing exercises, learning new behavioral responses. Another thing that can fill the gap is somatic movement. So what does that mean? That just means moving your body. Walking, yoga, strength training. These provide dopamine and serotonin through the body rather than through food. Get those endorphins going. The third thing that can fill this is social connection, genuinely one of the most powerful neurological regulators that we have. The brain releases oxytocin through connection, which directly counters the cortisol stress response. So spending time with friends, talking to friends on the phone, going to do an activity, having lunch, all of those things and that social connection makes things better. And then last, but definitely not least, is therapy or coaching. Cognitive behavioral therapy, talk therapy, they help you identify and reroute these old neural pathways toward new behaviors. And so taking that pathway that you used to use food for as emotional coping and learn how to use different things. Maybe therapy and coaching can help you implement some of the other things I talked about. The medication opens the window, and the behavior work is what you build through that window. So, in summarizing all the science behind what we've been talking about this week, emotional eating is a neurological adaptation. It is not a moral failing. Menopause makes you biologically more susceptible to it through the hormonal shifts that affect your core mood-regulating chemistry. And GLP-1 medications work in part by interrupting the brain's reward system to food, which is powerful, and which is also why the emotional adjustment is real and it deserves to be taken seriously. You are not imagining it. You're not being dramatic. You are experiencing a genuine neurochemical shift, and you are navigating it. That takes courage and self-awareness that most people could never develop. That's your clinical corner for week 9. Now back to our regular scheduled program. So week 9, the scale is doing its thing, but honestly, the most profound changes in this journey is not physical, it's emotional. They're in the way I talk to myself, the moments that I realize I made it through something hard without opening the refrigerator. In the grief I let myself feel and then let myself move through it. In the woman I'm slowly, imperfectly becoming without the reliance on food as my emotional coping mechanism. If you're stuck in the thick of the emotional side of this, the grief, the confusion, the identity questions, I just want you to know that means you're doing something good and you're going deep. And going deep is the way through it. We can't get over the process. We have to go through the process. And that is why being on a GLP-1 is a journey. It's a journey and a process. It's a marathon and not a sprint. And don't let anyone make you feel guilty or as if you cheated by choosing a medication to help you get on the right track on this journey. All weight loss, all journeys are difficult, whether you do it unmedicated or medicated. I'll see you in week 10. Until then, be kind to yourself. You're doing something really hard and really brave, and you're taking control of your health. I'll see you in the next one.